Welcome, everybody, back to the last interview of 2023, December 31st. And you always know that we like to go out with a bang and we like to go in with a bang. So here, the first bang, the first part of the fireworks. And I am very, very, very happy to have somebody here on the show whose work I've been following for a long time. And I know that a lot of people have done the same. So, Toby Driver, thanks for joining the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Before anybody asks, Toby Driver, I've heard of the name. Think of Maudlin, think of Kayo. And also, please think about his solo stuff, which is also very, very interesting. And Toby and I had been talking a little bit about what we were discussing today, or what we will be talking about. And there is something that I've read in connection to you very, very often, and that is the term avant-garde, avant-garde artist, avant-garde music. First of all, do you like the term, or is it by now annoying?
Well, I think I'm coming back around to it now. I go through these phases, and I really was into it, many years ago, like right at the beginning, and I had this drive to do kind of avant-garde stuff, and I guess by that it means something a little bit more than just progressive rock. It doesn't mean doing like odd times and stuff like that. It would mean something more like using really new techniques, and they could be they could be performance techniques, or they could be production techniques, but I think it's about using new techniques, and not really just like having advanced musical ideas. Like you could use like old advanced musical ideas. They can be old and advanced at the same time, and I wouldn't call that avant-garde. I think it has to be like, pretty new for it to be avant-garde. And a lot of the time, in the kind of history of the avant-garde, what ended up happening is that since so much Western music had already happened, and a lot of ideas had been used in really great ways, avant-garde music often could tend to be like kind of unlistenable, because it was frequently about the idea and the kind of the concept more than it was about the enjoyment, or like the actual like song, I guess. So anyway, when I was younger, I was trying to kind of marry these two things and have it be new techniques, but also pay really close attention to the song. And I think that made my work like really different from actual avant-garde music. I think anyway, because it was still songwriting. It was still like traditional songwriting, I would say. Even though like maybe the structure is a little bit different, there were songs there. There were supposed to be songs there, and then I put some new techniques inside of that. Okay, so then then after, do you want me to pause for a sec?
No. You go ahead.
Okay. So then I would say like around the kind of like second 10 years of my work, I started to feel that the avant-garde was really holding me back. And by that I mean that, my bands were playing a lot of shows with other bands that were also kind of sort of avant-garde, sort of experimental. And so like my band kind of found more activity in these kind of experimental scenes than we did in the like, let's say, metal, or in rock, or in all these like really, really cool shows and cool festivals that were reserved for all these other bands, like let's say like there are many bands these days that do really weird sounding heavy music, and nobody really considers them to be avant-garde or experimental. People just consider them to be modern. And uh and my work was really unlucky because we had this tag of experimental, we never were kind of involved in all that like cool stuff. You know, we weren't accepted that way. And I think still now, like people probably consider Kayo and stuff to be like a lot weirder than something like Big Brave or something, which is not, I don't think it's weirder than that, you know? I think like that's pretty like weird music. And you know, something like The Body or something like that music's pretty weird. It's cool and it's weird and it's heavy and people accept it as being cool, and they don't say that it's experimental music. And yeah, so I was feeling like damn, that term really has has held my bands back a lot, because the experimental scene, you know, like all that kind of like the Wire magazine scene and everything like that, we were always too metal for them, so they always ignored us. And then, you know, the kind of metal scene and everything was like we were too weird for them, so
Yeah.
they ignored us as well. So then we were just like kind of in this space where we're just like, okay, too heavy for this thing, too weird for this thing, we kind of exist nowhere. And that's been frustrating. So for a while I was like, fuck the avant-garde, I don't want to do that anymore. And like I made a few records that were ostensibly a lot more straightforward in terms of sound. And that actually, you know, that actually grew the profile of my bands a little bit. And I was like, man, it's so stupid how this works and how dumb this is, that like you could just like simplify and then like somehow get more accepted. But anyhow, I liked those records that I did like that, but now I have the itch to make some really strange stuff again. So probably the next stuff I do is going to be more towards the avant-garde side. But I think I'm not going to use that term, so I won't say that.
Would you agree that, I think you would agree when I say that avant-garde is a very is very soon a very outdated thing, because something that is avant-garde in 2023 will be not avant-garde anymore in 2028. Would you say the same?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of why I always thought that maybe as a songwriter, it would be a good idea to use avant-garde techniques in
Mhm.
my songwriting, instead of trying to have my whole identity be about whether it was avant-garde or not.
Yeah. And I think also that what you said, avant-garde, nowadays, isn't it more like a synonym for progressive, which 50 years ago was nothing else than, okay, trying to push boundaries?
I'm not so sure. It depends on if you're talking about rock music or not,
Mhm.
because at least being like kind of in the New York City area, um, they have this like avant-garde tradition from the 70s. And a lot of the time when you hear the term avant-garde referring to experimental music, I think a lot of the time it's referencing a lot of the stuff that happened um in the 70s.
Mhm.
And then like progressive stuff, progressive rock, usually to me, like anytime I hear it, people are just talking about like odd time signatures and stuff like that. It's like really
Mhm.
an oversimplified term. I think neither term are very accurate.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. But you know, like you could go and you could take some kind of idea that like Laurie Anderson used in her music, you know, and she was like
Mhm.
an avant-garde songwriter, and you could take some of those ideas and you could use them now, and they would still sound really forward thinking, you know. So I don't think that they would sound really dated at all, like you know, and that's a good example of something that was avant-garde and maybe never really explored to its fullest. And I think that's maybe one of the kind of like hidden treasures about things from the past that were avant-garde at the time is that sometimes something that's avant-garde happens and it's a curiosity, and people listen to it and they say, oh, that's very interesting that happened, and then they kind of forget about it. And then those things remain avant-garde because, you know, you could have these people in the 70s that did this really crazy stuff. And then what happened after that? Well, pop music continued, you know?
Yeah.
And so all of those ideas just like are in the archive somewhere, but they're not really being used. And so you could still use them, and they're still new because Taylor Swift's not using them, you know?
Don't get me started on that one. That is
Yeah.
you know, somebody who already ruined the NFL season for me is anyway. Interesting that you mentioned Laurie Anderson and that you mentioned that whole New York City scene, which I also very often think is either people see it's unmeasurable, unoverestimable, estimable influence, you know, Laurie Anderson, or also Suicide, you know, very early and mid-era-ish Sonic Youth, but also then other bands from totally different genres, like the Bad Brains, or also, you know, some of the stuff that some hip-hop artists did. I like the fact that you referred to New York. Would you say that New York, over the course of the last 45, 50 years, has been one of those avant-garde hotspots? Or do you think that it has diminished a little bit? Because right now we also have bands like Imperial Triumphant, who are very often considered avant-garde.
Yeah. I think New York definitely was, but I don't really see anything now. I mean, I don't live there anymore, so I'm not really like going to all the secret shows, you know. But I haven't really heard so much about the new shit coming from New York. I mean, like really avant-garde stuff. And there's a really obvious reason why. And it's because it's too expensive to live there. And so nobody can do anything there, you know? And so like you'll see a lot more of the avant-garde stuff happening in Europe because European like countries and cities have funding, and people and artists can be supported, and there are lots of experimental festivals, and there are lots of shows to play, and you can thrive there, and you just can't in New York, you know. I mean, I don't live there anymore because it's too expensive, and a lot of people had to move, not just because of the pandemic, but just because there's a housing crisis, and like there's no possible way to afford anything, you know. Yeah, so it's not good for the arts.
So would you say that gentrification is a bad thing for avant-garde music?
Oh, yes, of course, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I cannot imagine somebody living in Billionaires Row and doing avant-garde music. Yeah, just doesn't fit.
Yeah. Yeah, but then on the other hand, hang on though, on the other hand, there's also like this whole class of like aristocratic avant-garde musicians like Arca, you know, and then like and then you could say like, well, that's a totally different type of thing, you know. Someone that has like limitless amounts of money can feel free to just like mess around and come up with crazy stuff. And I know that a lot of people in this world think that that's actually a good system. You know, and they're like, oh, that's the way Western music has been, you know, like the Emperor of Austria, like funding shit, you know, like, yeah, but fuck that. That's not cool. I don't like that. And I'm not really like into aristocratic music, regardless of whether it's avant-garde or not, you know.
Do you think that that kind of influence limits the artist too much?
No, I don't think so. I just think it's just not really like healthy for the world. I think it's great for that particular artist, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, and then for the consumer who's like, oh, you know, like this person's making such great shit for us to consume. Okay, fine. Like if that's like all that you're interested in is like what you can consume and how it benefits your like
Yeah.
interest, you know, fine, okay. But like that's not good for the planet. It's not good for the community, you know. I don't see any
And
like the aristocratic artists actually like donating money to other artists or anything like that. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's what I meant. Like, I think that a lot of, if there is some kind of aristocratic influence or also governmental influence, it's very often the question of how much influence does that fund want to have on the artist's music. I mean,
Mm.
um, there is that saying, nobody bites or nobody should bite the hand that feeds you, right? And
Mm.
that's always the question. If the emperor of Japan or of Austria, for that matter, sponsored a musician back in the 19th century, that musician was also not free to do whatever he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also something that I always think about. I think nowadays with the possibilities of crowdfunding and Kickstarter and however you want to call it, I think that might be a more democratic way of getting the money to those artists.
Mm. Yeah, it could
And
be,
at the same,
but
yeah,
the
but
only
exactly,
the only problem there is that artist, in order to even get those communities to fund them, already has to have built their name somehow. You know what I mean? So it's
yeah,
like there's no way to start from zero and
yeah.
and participate in that.
I still remember like nearly 20 years ago when Radiohead first published an album basically for free. Um, I think it was in Rainbows. At
I
some
remember
point
that. Yeah.
later, they published, or they at least hinted at numbers, and the numbers were higher than any number that they had ever gotten through the regular process of going through a label.
Yeah,
So I
people
think
donated anyway. Hmm.
exactly. So I think that there is something totally true about what you say. In order for a crowdfunding artist to really get enough money, he has to have some kind of reputation. And then again, we come to the question whether that will ever be possible for an artist that does not try to cater to people's needs.
Mm. Yeah, I wonder. I think I've been like pretty fortunate with my fan base that you know I have this reputation of always like trying something new, and a lot of my fans will appreciate that, and you know they know that the next thing I put out isn't going to be what the last thing was, and I feel like maybe at this point in my career, maybe one of the worst things I could do is just make uh, something that's like the last thing I did. I think that would really piss some people off, you know. But I don't know. That's at least that's fortunate because like I'm still interested in doing new things. Um, but yeah, I'm a little bit lucky that there are the fans that are kind of going with me no matter what. And then if I put out something that they don't like, they're just like, well, I didn't like that one, but I'm looking forward
But
to what the next
yeah,
one
yeah,
is, you know.
correct. If I liked the last three records for whichever reason, and now the fourth one is not exactly what I wanted to have, well, he maybe went totally opposite of records A, B, C, but the fifth record is, as he tries to go away from D, he might go full circle again. Yeah, that's true. But then again, also for you, that works because at some point you already were an established artist, right?
Mm, yeah, yeah, a little bit anyway. A little bit.
Mm.
I have a very small fan base,
But very
but
loyal.
I'm established. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
loyal.
Yeah. They've been I saw them kind of like discussing they try to predict what the next one is going to be. They're like, you know, I saw them saying like, well, okay, usually what Toby does is that he'll do like He'll do like 3 that are weird, and then he'll do 1 metal one, and then he'll do 3 more that are weird, and then he'll do 1 metal one. And so they try to kind of like triangulate when the metal one is going to happen.
Sounds a little bit like Tool. Sounds a little bit like the Tool. It sounds a little bit like the Tool fan base who are trying to understand the record through the Fibonacci sequence. So is that something that you do? You look at your fan forums or at people discussing your work?
Well, I have this Discord channel. I'm the only moderator, so so I have to go on and make sure nobody's saying any like stupid racist shit, you know. But they don't, so it's okay. I don't participate because it's better to just let them talk about whatever they want to talk about instead of me just going in and interfering. Yeah.
So is your Discord moderator post or your administrator position, do they see when you read something? Because I know that there are Discords where you see that the administrator has read the stuff.
Oh, you know what? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm like one of those like parents that's like, I don't know the technology well enough, you know, and I have to have like I have to have somebody program my VCR for me, you know. So yeah, maybe they can see and I just don't know.
Talk about it, you know. We have a nearly 11-year-old daughter. She's going to turn 11 very soon, and by now you can already see, okay, when you say like, okay, you got to do this and that, and then she's like, yeah, I know. And I think, okay, she's 11 soon. How will it be in 2 years, 3 years? You know, will she then be telling us how to do stuff? Probably.
Yeah, if she even wants to talk to you anymore at that point.
Hey, come on. don't already break my heart before it's there. Yeah, I know. I'm already getting the looks.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting, and that is something that is also very interesting about your body of work. You've mentioned it. You know, some kind of unpredictability, which is, you know, for us, the result is unpredictable. And for you, that's different because for you, what we are getting is the result of a long process. Is it important for you to challenge yourself through your music?
Yeah, that's actually kind of the most important thing. I mean, aside from expressing myself, but part of expressing myself is challenging myself, because my work is it's a process of self-discovery, and I've only like realized this like after, you know, like many years later, after I've made many things, and I look back and I say, what is my work all about? You know, like if I was going to make an artist statement, and you have to like figure out like, what am I actually doing? Why am I doing this? And I think at least now, I think I could be, you know, maybe 10 years from now, I'll be like, no, I was wrong about that too. But right now, I think that my work is a process of self-discovery and kind of like figuring out who I am and what I like and what my identity is. And, you know, it's kind of like if you know, when you start off and you're like a teenager and you're like, okay, I like these things, and you think you know who you are. And then you start making all this work to reflect that. Then, you know, as you get to be around like 29, 30, what happens is like, you're like, well, I've been doing this for this long, and what if I just don't want to do this anymore? What if I want to do something else? And am I allowed to do that? Or am I not allowed because I'm this person, like I'm a metalhead. I have to do that, you know, like, and so you have this whole like process of kind of wondering what you're allowed to do, what you should do, what's going to be true to yourself, because you don't really know who you are, because your only idea of yourself is your past self, you know, so you don't know how to be true to your future self. You only know how to be true to your past and present self. And so therefore, I think that's what my work is. And so like every time I'm doing something, I'm like, okay, what's the next thing that I can kind of discover about what's interesting to me? and I guess just not trying to say something that I already said, especially when I feel like I said it like quite successfully. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's just kind of that. Like I always come up with like a new technique or like something that I don't know for my next record. And you know, I've said this in interviews before, but even when I did a record of like really simple ballads that were just like, you know, each song had like one or two parts. For me, that was actually like experimental for me because I hadn't done that before. So that was like part of a process of me just trying something that I hadn't done. It's new for me, you know. And I did this, like I did an electronic record, and that was like, you know, that's not forward thinking for like the world. Lots of people make electronic records, but I never did. So for me, that was like, it was experimental for me, you know. And I kind of engage with those things.
So then I take it that, I mean, like, of course, you already mentioned repetition to you in a way would be redundant and therefore obsolete. Is that also a general character trait of yours that you can nowadays see in yourself, that you are willing to take risks, trying to discover new things also outside of music? For example, let's say food, trying to discover new cuisines. Is that something that is a character trait?
Yeah, but I'm not a thrill seeker, you know. Like I'm not like one of those people that's like, oh, I have to skydive because I've like, you know, because I've done it all, you know. Like I'm not like that, you know. But yeah, I definitely like to be adventurous with the stuff I try. Sure. But I think like now, like at this age, I'm also not that risky with like my behavior, you know, because I don't want to like kind of, you know, like I kind of have like a pretty decent system of how I do things, and I don't really want to damage that, you know. I could be like kind of risky, but I'm not so sure I would do something so risky as to totally jeopardize my lifestyle, you know.
Maybe also because you are now, just like me, at a point where we can say, okay, I know I have not done this, but I know it will probably cause this or that effect in me. For example, skydiving, you know, I know that a lot of people say the thrill of a life and you have to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I also know that there are certain rides in like parks, like Six Flags or something like that. And I know that if I go on certain of those rides, I'm going to be sick to death. And I know that if I did skydiving, I would probably be the one vomiting up. So the guy behind me is like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
that
Or you
is
know,
that
like I don't
also
want to.
something? Is that also
Go ahead.
something where you say like this process of self-discovery is nowadays in a certain way also limited by your ability of self-evaluation?
No, not at all. I don't think so.
Mhm.
I mean, especially if we're talking about arts, you know. I mean, the art, like making art is, I mean, you know, it's my life. Like I take it extremely seriously, but it is just art, you know. Skydiving can kill you. And like art is, it's not gonna, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, like bigger picture,
I
of
know what you
course, you know, it has big impacts, of course, but I think like, you know, no matter what I try, it's not gonna be that serious. I mean, I'll take
mean.
it seriously, but it's not going to be like life and death. You know what I'm saying?
And one question that I very often ask on this show, and I've already had people commenting on saying like, "Oh, you also ask that over and over again." Anyway, I think in this context, it's an interesting thing when you say like, you take your art seriously, but then again, you also know it's only quote unquote art. Um,
Right.
One of the questions that one of the avant-garde artists of the 20th century posed, Frank Zappa, you know which one I'm talking about, the question of, does humor belong in music? How would you answer that one?
Yeah, I think like it really just depends on the intention of the work. I mean, like I think there's some work that wants to have humor, and then there's other work that doesn't. And yeah, there's no kind of like universal way that it should be. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes it belongs there, sometimes it doesn't.
Have you already had those moments when you thought, okay, this is a funny thing, a humorous thing, and people totally mistook it?
You mean in my own work?
Yeah.
Um, when I was in high school, I made some music that was humorous. And then since then since then in my own work there hasn't really been any. Um Actually, no, I think on my 2015 solo record in the La Library Loft, there's some kind of funny stuff. But it doesn't really usually show up in my own work because my own work is normally about like pretty heavy things.
Mhm.
But I play in a few other bands that are simultaneously serious and sometimes funny. And I think it's great. I think it actually adds to the work in those cases. But yeah, it hasn't really popped up in my stuff recently.
Um, is that also because your music for you, as self-discovering as it is also probably a way of cleaning the system?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with me as it is with like almost every other metalhead you probably have met, that like they're really, really nice people, even though the music is quite violent, you know? And I mean, if the music is doing its job, then that's what should happen, you know? But if the music is failing to be um the catharsis, then you're still going to hold all those things inside. But yeah, of course, it's important to put them into the work.
And if it still is kept inside because of a failure, then you would probably be one, I guess, to say, okay, maybe I have to rework it, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, like composition in music is a form of communication.
Mhm.
And if you're not communicating well and not being understood, then it's not all the listener's fault that they're not understanding you. It's also
Mhm.
because you didn't communicate well.
Um, let's just take that little step back to you said, when you were in high school, you did some humorous things. Maybe even a little step before that. When did
Hmm.
you notice for yourself that music is something that you want to do your whole life? That it's like one of the pillars of your personality?
Mm. I think it started happening probably when I was around 11 or so, because I was playing uh clarinet in the school band, and I advanced pretty quickly, and I was like the top musician in the school band. And then I went on to be in like the state band and everything like that. And so I was doing really well. And it was in contrast to like, I was also playing sports. I mean, my dad was trying to get me to play sports, and I hated them. And I mean, I don't hate them. I don't like, I'm glad my dad like helped me have that experience, but like it wasn't my thing. And I definitely like didn't excel at sports, but I was doing really well at music. And so it was really nice to be like, oh, this is something I'm actually good at, and that's something that other people are validating me at. Um, and so I started just like thinking about that a lot. And then when I was in high school, I made some friends that had like some mutual interests and everything like that. And so we were like helping each other um, to explore and to kind of nurture this side of ourselves.
Mhm.
And in throughout that process, um, like I said, it was I was excelling at it, and I also like I was being nurtured, and so all those things were like I can definitely do this. And then actually, like then the final straw was like when I was going to college, I actually was gonna um, go to school for astronomy, because I also liked space and physics a lot when I was in high school.
Over Brian
And
May,
then
with Brian Mayway.
yeah. And then when it came time to kind of like go to college and like choose my major and everything like that, um, I learned that that when you are studying astronomy, you don't actually get to see anything beautiful with your eye. I mean, like, astronomers would say it is beautiful because it's numbers and math, but like you don't get to
Mhm.
see cool pictures of planets and shit. You just have to like see like the representation of them in like in math, and like you'll look at like a spectrum and they're like, oh, this is like blue, so that means that there's this chemical, and that's what astronomy. And so I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to see like constellations and stuff. Anyhow,
Yeah.
so then I was like, well, I'm going to do something that's like a little bit more aesthetic. Um,
Mhm.
so I was already a musician, so I was like, well, I'll study music. That was going to be my second choice anyway.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, any like scientist out there hearing what I'm saying right now, disclaimer, I totally understand the beauty of the math and of the science now, but at the time when I was 17, I was just like, no. Okay, so anyhow, so then I started studying it in college, and then I was like, okay, I'm doing this, and then I just from then on I spent all my time uh just doing that. Yeah.
Again, something that you say, like where the personal development and
Hmm.
reflection on yourself um, kicks in a lot later. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm like, we both know that you like metal music, of course. Has there ever been a kind of like record where you select one record or one event, maybe a concert, TV show, whatever, where you select, okay, that kickstarted my love for the riff?
Oh, for the riff. Um, yeah, it has to be Nirvana, you know. And like the record, I mean, I guess the first Nirvana record I heard was Nevermind. I was just the
Hmm.
correct age for it at the time. But once you like check out the other records, like the riffs are a bit cooler on the other records. And I would say so, like, yeah, just like combination of like Nevermind and Incesticide and Bleach, just getting into those, you're just like, yeah. And I know that's not really metal, you know what I mean? So like then for metal, I think Entombed was probably like the next
Hmm.
big one for me. Um yeah, I really loved them when I was like 13, 14. I mean, for a while I loved them, but I got into them pretty early, and the riffs are pretty like pretty easy to understand, because like I was
Hmm.
listening to like Deicide and stuff at the same time, but like that shit's so impenetrable for like a young listener.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like indiscernible a lot of the time. But Entombed was really easy to understand, I think.
that's true. Uh,
Yeah.
which I think is also one of the reasons why they appeal to to different fan bases.
Hmm.
I had a lot of friends in my youth who were die-hard punk fans, but they liked Entombed. And on the same side, there were lots of metalheads who would never have loved anything punkish, but they liked Entombed. And
Hmm.
I think there is something where they were right on that little razor's edge. I can see that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
have you also ever had like records where your friends said like, okay, that is something that you will definitely like, and you
Mhm.
listened to it and you were like, hell no.
Yeah. Yeah. Rush is that band. Um,
Oh yeah,
and
thank you.
yeah, yeah. I just can't get into them. And everybody's like, you're the type of guy that would definitely like them. And like, I see what you're saying, but I just don't.
For me, I can listen to every Rush song as long as I turn it onto the karaoke version of my stereo, so that I just, the lyrics are just killing it for me. It sounds like Chipmunk on autotune. Again, like, nothing against his musicianship. He's a very good musician at his instrument, but his voice is just, I don't know. And I have to say that there are other people with very high vocals that I really, really like. I like Coheed and Cambria. And other bands where the singer also has a very high voice, but there is something in Geddy Lee that just never kicked me.
And I also think that, going back to your question about humor in music, is that, like, I think one really big difference between Coheed and Cambria and Rush is that Rush has humor in their music and Coheed and Cambria doesn't. At least, like, from my understanding, from being somebody that doesn't really listen to either of them very much, what I do understand about those two bands is that Coheed is pretty serious, and I know they did have like the sci-fi thing for a while, but there's like a lot of like emotion and pain in those stories, and Rush, I mean, they would do stuff like they'd have like washing machines on stage with them when they play, and like rotisserie chicken on stage with them and that kind of shit. You've heard about this, right? Or and it's like, that's just not my vibe. I mean, like, good for them, but that's not my vibe, really.
Yeah, it's there are maybe too avant-garde in their performance. No, but I know what you mean. It's and that is also something where I say that can annoy me about avant-garde music, if I hear or see that a musician just tries too hard, when it just doesn't feel natural anymore.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say as well about avant-garde. Excuse me. About oh my light just fell. Sorry about that. Well, okay. So yeah,
we could still
but yeah, they good. Okay, yeah, but they do say like that like being experimental is, it goes too far without thinking in service of the song. And I actually I agree, and that's why I was saying at the beginning of this talk that I always thought that kind of like thinking of myself as a songwriter and wanting to use avant-garde ideas and stuff like that, but like try to fit them into the song in some way instead of the opposite direction.
Something that also comes up very often when you hear that term is a connection to something like improvisation. Is that something that you like to do on stage, like improvise parts, or you say like, oh, I wrote that for a certain purpose and I like to keep it that way?
Let's see. I really, really like improvisation, but in Kayo it doesn't come up so much, because the architecture of Kayo is complex. So so things need to work together in certain. It's orchestral music, really. There are lots and lots of parts going, and they have to work together. And if you have improvisation like with many layers, they don't, like, there's a lot of like possibility for them to not work together and to collide. But then in Kayo, there's like a couple songs where there's just like one instrument playing, and there's some room for improvisation in the performance there, because it's not going to conflict with anything. But generally speaking, with orchestrated stuff, you can't really do it so much. Well, I mean, of course you can compose like orchestral improvised music, but my music is not that. I use it more in other groups, not Kayo so much, but other things I do.
What is also very interesting about that whole improvisation thing is that sometimes, unless you have very, very talented musicians, it basically ends up in cacophony, right? Is that something where you say that can be used to a certain degree, or is that something where you say, not my cup of tea?
Oh, it's definitely my cup of tea. But I think you have to start from that point. You know? Like have you ever checked out like the composer Yanku Dumitrescu? Like he's got like
Not yet.
a lot of, yeah, he's considered to be like a spectral composer, you
Mhm.
know? So he's got a lot of this music where it's like an orchestra,
Mhm.
and he'll just be like kind of like conducting gestures, and like they'll be like kind of improvising this kind of noise, and and really like the music will just follow his gestures. And
Mhm.
that's kind of like where, that's kind of like where the expression is like how do you follow these gestures with the dynamics and the
Mhm.
noise and everything like that. And that's extremely cool, extremely cool.
So-
But I haven't done that. Yeah.
Also sounds a little bit, when you describe that, it sounds a little bit like the way that Zappa conducted his musicians.
Hmm.
I mean, like there are so many stories about Zappa as a band leader or composer or um, director on stage. But it's very often very easy to see how his musicians had to follow him.
Mm-hmm.
When you play with Kayo Dot, do
Mm-hmm.
you consider yourself a part of a band, or do you still consider yourself a little bit of a composer who
It
leads
depends
a
on
band?
yeah, yeah. It depends on well, oh no. I'm sorry. Yeah, the answer to your question is yeah, I definitely think of myself as a band leader and
Mhm.
composer. But some of the music requires me to have more of like a conductor role,
Mhm.
and other pieces uh, I can just play, just like every other member of the band is playing. But
Mhm. Mhm.
it depends, because like some records do have this like conducted thing where I have to like gesturally conduct people. But unlike the Dumitrescu stuff I was talking about, all the stuff that I'm conducting is like specific, So it'll be like
Mhm.
it has to be this chord played
Yeah.
with this gesture. Uh, um, and then yeah, and then there are other songs where it's just like a rock song and nothing has to be conducted, so you can just play.
Very, very interesting. Would you,
Hmm.
I'm like after 20 some years right now of KO dot or close to 20 years. Um, would you consider this your project or a democratic band where everybody has a say in a lot of things?
Oh, yeah, I consider it to be mine. There were some eras in KO like a couple years here and there I where I wanted to be this kind of more like a democratic band, except it didn't work. Like the other guys in those cases just like they didn't really know what to do, and like and anytime I would ask them for something, they would just be like, "Yeah, but this is your thing, so
Mm.
we can't really do anything." And so yeah, after all this time, I've just accepted that it's just my thing.
Just
Yeah, so
then it is always a question, when you go into a studio and record,
mm,
are they, I don't want to say given sheet music because I guess that's not the case, but um, are they given very strict, this is the way it should sound like instructions, or
mm.
are there still little bits where a
um
fill
they
here, a lick there?
they are given sheet music, but but first of all,
Okay,
they
okay, sorry.
but usually we like we'll work that out in rehearsal before, like there's
Mhm.
not usually a case when we go into the studio and someone hasn't seen the music before and they need to read it in the studio. That hasn't really happened, unless it's like I remember on like one record I hired some horn players for one record, and so they were just session guys. So they came in and read it on that in that
Mhm.
case. But yeah, but then when it's a song that we've worked out in the studio, we already know what we're doing. There's not a lot of flexibility. Maybe there'll be like a creative overdub here and there, something
Mhm.
that we hadn't thought of before. Um, but yeah, it's auteur music. Yeah, everything's specific.
I like the openness with which you talk about it, because very often we get people who are like, oh no, we do everything as a band, and then, you know, a few months later you hear like, oh no, we were told to play this and that, and he said it. That is very interesting and refreshing.
Oh. I wish I mean,
you
I would love to have a band like that. Kayo.'s not that band though. Like I was in some other bands where it was kind of like I had this band Vora, and I would say like Vora like didn't necessarily break up. We still might exist. We don't know, but like we haven't done anything in a while. But that band we were
don't break
trying
hearts. I know one of our writers is very strong on that band, so don't say they just have a pause, right?
Well, it's just that we don't live in the same city anymore, so we don't
Yeah.
really know what's going on. But that band we attempted to be democratic, and it made everything go so slow
Mhm.
that I think that's like a main reason why we're actually not doing anything right now, is
Mhm.
because it's like democracy paralysis, you know,
Yeah.
and all of us were just like saying to the singer, we were just like, well, man, and they're like, you should really like take charge of everything, and he really wanted it to be democratic, and anyway it slowed everything down. So I see that doesn't really work very well in bands unless maybe I guess unless maybe there's a case where there aren't any very strong ideas, and I guess this kind of sounds like an insult in a way to these bands that are democratic. I don't really mean it to be an insult, but maybe there's some truth to that, you know, maybe nobody has a strong idea, and that's why a democratic situation in a band can work, because everyone's just like, well, whatever, oh yeah, this is cool, okay, this is cool, yeah, what do we want to be? I don't know, let's just like throw shit together and like see what happens,
I think,
you know.
you know, it's not about the quality of the ideas, but the speed of a process. I think if you have a band that is really democratic, as you said, it slows things down, which also means that probably none of the musicians can live off of it, because you have to have a certain kind of productivity and to make a buck out of it. Maybe not a complete living, but you know what I mean. Like, to get at least maybe 3 months rent out of it in a year. And you know, I think there the question of productivity comes into play. Is that important to you, to be also a productive musician, to have shit coming out on a regular basis?
Yeah, and I've actually slowed down a bit in the past few years. And I don't know why, because I work on it every single day. But I think maybe like you know, as we said earlier, like because I'm trying to kind of like have new processes each time, like every single time I'm doing something, there's this big learning curve, and maybe my standards are higher because I have a body of work to compare them to now. So yeah, I am working on music every single day, and multiple projects at the same time, but they take a lot longer to come out. And also, yeah, another thing that's different now is that the labels that I work with now, they take a lot longer to put records out as well. Like it used to be back in the day where like we could deliver an album to a label, and then they would release the record within like 3 or 4 months from then.
Yeah.
And nobody will do that now. You know, you send the record to the label, and they're like, okay, like 18 months from now, we're gonna put this out. And you're like, okay, this is like not super useful to me. So like the only way to kind of accommodate for that situation is that you have to have many bands. And so like, let's say I deliver a KO record, and like, okay, if I deliver the KO record to Prophecy tomorrow, you know, it probably won't come out until 18 months from now. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, you know, maybe 12 months. It might come out in 12 months. So in that entire time between then, I have to do other records, you know, and I have to like play in other bands, and I have to, yeah, it's important. I mean, because obviously, you know, like you know, it's my career, and I have to be like totally doing something all the time. I have to be playing a gig, or I have to be somehow selling a record or something like that.
I know from some musicians that they also do something that they very often are not very happy about, but that they do, for example, commissioned music, like jingles for commercials and stuff like that. If necessary, would you do that in order to make a living?
Yeah, absolutely. I would consider myself to be blessed to have that gig, and I don't have that gig, and I wish I did, because I could definitely use more paying work. If anyone ever came to me and was like, please, like, write a 30-second jingle, I'd be so happy to do that. Yeah, it'd be really easy, and I get paid, and it would be music, and of course I would do that. Oh my God. Please, like, come at me with like your gig ideas.
Yeah. So for everybody in the commercial advertisement business, here is a man who would sell his soul to do your jingle. So of course, also with a little look at the time. So what can we expect next from Toby Driver? Which record will come out next that you have produced in 2021?
In 2021.
No, what is the next thing that's gonna be published?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just finished a new record by Alora, Crucible, which is my new age thing. So I just finished the record, and the release plan for that depends on who my team is. You know what I mean? Like, if it comes out with a label, if it comes out with House of Mythology again, that would be awesome, but I haven't really talked to them yet. But if it comes out with a label, I imagine the release will be at least a year from now. But if I can't get any label interest, I'll just self-release it, and I could probably do that within the next couple of months. And then we finished a record by my like improv trio Blood Mist. We finished it, a while ago, and we're gonna self-release it within a couple months from now. And then I'm working on a new Kayo record now, and that's gonna be through Prophecy. So, who knows when that'll come out? But hopefully it comes out in 2024, because it's like a 20th anniversary celebration sort of album. And this year is the anniversary, so I sure hope it comes out in time for that.
Maybe Gunnar has to be a little bit faster.
Another thing I did, I played bass. Yeah. And I played bass on a new Extra Life record as well. It's this like progressive kind of heavy band in New York that I play bass in. Yeah, so should have a bunch of stuff coming out pretty soon.
Very, very interesting. So we'll keep an eye and an ear out for that. Toby, whenever we do these kinds of interview, I've already told you, there is always at the end the infamous quickfire round, and you also have to go through that. You got two alternatives. Pepsi, for example, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. You have to choose one of the two and give a short explanation. Let's start off with some metal.
Okay.
Krellis versus Gorguts.
Oh man, difficult, but I'm gonna pick Krellis on this one. Yeah, and I would say the main reason I'm picking Krellis is because I love how Colin is just getting into like synth universe for the past few records. I just think that's like the coolest. It's the coolest sound, and actually like the older Krellis stuff that was just the black metal, and then like they were getting like really technical like for a couple records, and I actually like that's when I like kind of started to lose a little bit of interest in Krellis. And then they came back with the synth stuff, and I was like, yes, this is what I want. And I enjoy every single thing that they do now. And of course Gorguts I love, but they don't have the synth stuff, so there you go.
Then the question would be, if you like that synth stuff so much, how do you feel about Blood Incantation? And they're two very, very different sides. Do you more like the tech dev stuff, or do you say like, oh, that synth thing which sounds like Klaus Schulze and Doldinger and all the 70s guys, that's something that catches my ear?
Man, I would have to say I haven't heard that side of Blood Incantation yet. I think last
Ben?
time I heard them was like I think it was a couple years ago. They put out a record that sounded a lot like Morbid Angel, and I really liked it a lot. But
That
if
was
they did
probably
something,
Starspawn.
yeah, yeah, and then if they did something after that, I hadn't heard it yet. So
Then check out Time Waves. I'm not sure, is it Time Wave Zero or Time Wave Zero?
okay,
That will probably catch you. I'm pretty sure about that.
all right,
You've
yeah.
already mentioned friends of mine from Canada. Big Brave.
Uh-huh.
Which record do you prefer more? Their last one, Nature Morte or
Mm.
Vital?
I think I can't answer this question because I don't really know them well enough to really say. They're one of these bands that I've heard in passing many times, but I don't think I could tell you like which song is on which record.
Is that generally something that you like droney metal, like Big Brave, Sun, and other stuff like that?
Um, well, yeah, I do like it. I do like it. I think the best one is Connie out of all that kind of um like style of drone metal.
Mm-hmm.
And Burning Witch I loved. But yeah, and then there was like actually this period, I guess it was around 2006-ish when Sun kind of was just blowing up,
Mm-hmm.
and then KO would go on tour, and like every single show would be some local band that was doing this drone shit. And
Mm-hmm.
it really was driving me crazy. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is so stupid. I was like, everybody's being so lazy and thinking that they can just like have the really loud amps and make this like legitimate. I mean, it's like illegitimate, whatever, that word is bullshit, but it's like, why should I listen to this?
Mm-hmm.
Just because like it's fun for you to like drone out in like a loud amp. Like I'm the listener. Like why I'm forced to be at this show.
Yeah, yeah.
Like please, like give me something. And so like it really like bothered me a lot during those years. I was so sick of that shit. But now nowadays, like since it's not so trendy anymore, it's a bit interesting again.
Did you
Because I
listen
think
to
the
the
people
last
that are doing
Canate
it now
record?
are I did, of course, yeah.
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 And I love them. I really love that band. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing them at
I
Roadburn.
didn't think that was their Yeah, yeah. I didn't think that was their best album, but like I did like it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that they would think of their music in terms of best, because best is just too
Mm.
positive, too bright in a way. Um,
The least worst.
but by the way, if anybody wants to check out or wants to have some more information on Big Brave or on Sun, or also on a few other artists that I still have on my list here, check out our archive here at the Veil of Sound, because we have interviews with all of those artists. Not all of those. I would still love to have an interview with Colin from Krellis. But that will happen, I'm
And
telling
what
you, folks. That will
he,
happen.
he won't do
Um,
it or something? What's the problem?
I haven't asked him yet. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
that okay, folks. Promise next year, 2024, we're gonna have an interview with Colin from Krellis here on the Veil of
Yeah, you
Sound.
should ask him.
I'm very sure he'll do it. Um, I think that you might like a tiny bit of classic rock. So
Yeah.
I give you two alternatives: CCR or Led Zepp.
Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you say why?
Yeah. Well, man, I love Robert Plant's voice. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it's amazing. And I like their use of reverb,
Mm-hmm.
He always gets me with that. And I think that the like kind of like choice of like chord voicings and stuff are a
Mm-hmm.
lot more interesting from a guitar perspective. And um yeah, the writing is cooler. I guess CCR to me, they sound like they just sound like classic rock, you know? Like they
Yeah,
just have this sound that's just like a classic rock sound. And I feel like Led Zeppelin's sound it exists outside of that a bit. Like
yeah.
they still sound like something different, you know, and something kind of new. It's kind of like, you know, like I would say, you know, the Miles Davis album Kind of Blue,
Of
which is
course,
this kind of like legendary jazz album, is considered to be one of the
the
greatest.
birth of
And
cool
to me, you
jazz.
know, as a yeah, yeah, and like I'm not really a jazz fan.
Mhm.
Um and so that record, I have this problem because that record to me sounds like jazz, you know, and it's just like exactly that sound. And I know obviously like they established the sound. I see that it's extremely valuable. But for me, just coming from it from the future, you know, like looking back at it, to me, like it sounds just like jazz and like nothing else about it. You know, I'm gonna probably get a lot of like hate for saying that, but it's not like the fault of the musicians or the record. It's just like that sound is like it's that sound. And I think CCR is kind of like that too. They're just like a classic rock sound, so it's not actually that interesting.
Mm.
But Led Zeppelin is like they sound like something else, so it's interesting.
I can use your answer to come up with my next couple, and I can here show a little bit of transparency for everybody out there. I have like a list of questions. I don't know if you can see that. I have like a short list of questions, and very often during the interviews, I come up with questions in my head, and that just happened when Toby used the words back and future very close to each other. So, Back to the Future, part one or part three?
Part one. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, do I really have to justify this decision? I mean,
No.
it's just yeah, it's just the perfect movie, you know?
Yeah.
And it came out right at the right time for me to actually watch it and give it my attention. I feel like Back to the Future 3 probably came out like when I was old enough to like stop paying attention to it so much, you know? So maybe I would have loved it if as much if it came out at the right moment, um but yeah, I mean like also like the music side of Back to the Future 1, you know, all the songs are so important to the movie.
Yeah, and
I
we
don't think
all have images in our head when we hear like dun, 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 and we all have images in our head, right? Don't we?
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I still don't understand why Crispin Glover threw away so much before part two, but I'm like, that's his choice. I'm not sure if you know the next couple.
Okay.
But I think you'll like them. If you don't know either of them, just say that's okay. Because I think you might like them because they both combine a really extreme form of metal with classic composing. And one of
Okay.
them is the collaboration record between James Romick and Mike Scheidt, The
Okay.
Complexity of Distance. And the other is Scarcity, where the last leader of the Glenn Branca Orchestra,
Mm,
Brendan Russell Myers, teams up with the singer from Pyron. So Scarcity
mm.
or Romick and Scheidt.
Um, I haven't heard the Mike Scheidt record, but I have heard Scarcity and I like it.
Mhm.
Um, I found that track one of the Scarcity album is really amazing.
Yeah.
And then the other songs are like pretty cool, but like didn't really blow me away the way that the first track did.
Mm.
But I do really like you know, Doug, the singer from Piran. You know, he's kind of in the New York scene. I see him a lot, and he's a great vocalist, and like all the projects that he's in are really cool. You know, he's got good taste. Hmm. Yeah, and I'll check out that other one. I just haven't heard it.
The Complexity of Distance. For everybody, again, check our
Mm,
archives. Very often when we talk about avant-garde music, it's very often also about sounds. And one sound that to me always two sounds that are very, very distinct is the sound of the singing saw where people make like sounds out of it. And the other one, which sounds similar, but a little less metallic, of course, is the theremin. If you could incorporate one of both into one of the next albums, which one would be your choice right now?
It would be the singing saw, and I'll tell you why.
Please.
Because I really was super into theremin. I mean, I guess I am really into theremin, but I was so into it that I wanted to use it, and I thought it would be a really cool idea to write sort of like a concerto for theremin, like a kind of orchestral concerto for theremin, but it would be paired up with a few other like similar instruments. And I did some research on who the best kind of like classical theremin players are in the world, and I went online for a while and I was like just trying to find them. And what I found was that there are some pieces out there, some classical compositions out there that already feature theremin. And I listened to them, and it's like these are like the world-class theremin players. And the thing is, like, it's just not that cool. I think like my image of it is a lot cooler than what it actually is in practice. And I really like I really really love there's this theremin solo on this Goldfrapp song, like on I think it's like her first record, and it's like one of the
Gold
songs
Mountain,
that's like
yes.
big. Yeah, and like there's one song that it just has this kind of like distorted theremin solo, and I just thought it was like the coolest sound ever, and I was like, man, I love this. I want to use this as much as I can. But yeah, after I did some research on it, it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's not as cool as you would imagine it to be. On the other hand, I remember like Kayo toured with this band Cerberus Shoal. They were kind of like a folk like collective. They had like 7 people in the band. Long ago, it was like in 2005, I think, and they had a lot of acoustic instruments, kind of blended with a couple electric instruments, and they used a singing saw in many of the things, and the way that it just blended with their ensemble was really really beautiful and made a really strong impression. But the reason why I said these days I would want to use it is because I'm spending a lot of time exploring acoustic music now. Kayo has like, like all these electric instruments and everything like that. But I have my other band, Alora Crucible, which is like new age and stuff. And I play hammered dulcimer, and there's acoustic violin, and we're really kind of exploring just acoustic stuff, and like vocals with no microphone and that kind of thing. And I could really imagine the singing saw fitting in that context really well. Yeah, blending it with the hammered dulcimer would be perfect. It'd be great. I would love to do that.
Sounds very interesting. 2 questions left. John Zorn, one of the persons always mentioned when it comes to avant-garde. Would you rather listen to, again, right now, would you rather listen to Painkiller or Naked City?
Well, which Naked City?
The one with Penn.
The one with Mike Patton? That's like the Lang Che like reissue, I guess? Or is he?
I think it is.
Because was he on but am I right about, just correct me if I'm wrong, is the original of Lang Che with Yamataka Ai, and then they did a reissue with Patton? Is that what happened?
I'll check it just for you, just a second. So
okay. But anyway, despite all of that, there's this one Naked City album called Absinthe, which is like lots of like close harmony, almost like microtonal clean guitar. That one is amazing. And yeah, like for all like the other Naked City stuff that's kind of like zany or like the Lang Che thing that I think we were talking about, at least that record Absinthe is an outlier and really remarkable, I think. If you just want to listen to like kind of clean guitar chord clusters, I think I would rather listen to that right now.
So Langche is it seems as if it's featuring Mike Patton, because he is mentioned in the liner notes, so
Okay,
that
the
might
original
be
then.
something.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Last one for all the black metal fans
Okay.
out there. Two of the early ones. Mayhem versus Bathory.
Mayhem. Definitely. Yeah. I never could get into Bathory very much. I tried. But it's a little too old sounding for me. You know? Yeah, I mean, like when I was first getting into black metal, Bathory was old, like very old, you know?
Yeah.
And it sounded like well, it sounded like Iron Maiden or something, you know? You know, it's just like it didn't sound like black metal to me. You know what I mean? Like the black metal sound that I was expecting was closer to, you know, like death metal, mayhem-ish kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. And so then you go back and you check out like the older stuff like Bathory of Venom or something, and you're just like, this is not what I was looking for. You know, and his voice is really funny. He's almost like the Geddy Lee of black metal, you know?
I know, and I know I've heard that before, and I've heard people telling me like, how can you like him and not Geddy? And I'm like, he makes me giddy. He's just Geddy, you know, like, I don't know. It's interesting. That is the first of your answers. That is the first of your answers in this infamous Cookvara where we would disagree. In all the others, I would totally agree with you, but
okay,
I don't know. Maybe that's, I don't know.
All right.
Although I also discovered later on, you know, I don't know, but Bathory just has something for me. Anyway, Toby, thanks for all your time. Thanks for the wonderful chat. And again, a little transparency for everybody. We have been talking about the avant-garde. We have been talking about improvisation. And basically, this whole conversation was an improv. And it was one of the most wonderful interviews that I have done in a very, very long time. So thank you, Toby, for that. For everybody out there, if you listened to this one, if you liked it, then maybe give us a like here on our socials. You can also find us on Patreon, you know, if you want to support us a little bit more. But first and foremost, if you like this interview and if you like our other interviews, why don't you want to be a friend and tell a friend? This is the last interview for 2023. So a lot of you will probably see this in 2024. And that leads me to the stuff that I always do at the end. Toby, your chance to use the last few sentences or last few moments and say something to our audience for 2024.
All right. Well, I wish everybody has a peaceful 2024 and just try to stay calm and try to be good to each other.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.